So I was having a conversation about 2 episodes ago with Adam Asane. He is the CEO of the Moleskin Foundation. And the Moleskin Foundation is very clear about using creativity as a source for good. But we got into this definition of creativity, and his view is very refreshing because it goes beyond the artistic ability. But you're an ad guy. If somebody says, "What does creativity mean to you?" What's your stab at a definition?
Well, I would reframe the question a little bit because I just had this conversation on Saturday with some friends who were coming through town, and they stayed with us overnight. Everybody's vaccinated, and so they came and stayed, and we were talking, and we were talking about songwriting because I'm a songwriter. I write songs. Whether they're good or not is a whole other thing. But he was like, "Oh, I could never do that." And I was reading Jeff Tweedy's book. Jeff Tweedy from Wilco, the band Wilco, has a book called How to Write One Song, and it's a beautiful book on creativity. I would say the two best books I've read on creativity are actually Stephen King's book. It's called On Writing.
Yeah.
And now Jeff Tweedy's book, How to Write One Song, because everybody's creative. You can't not be creative. If you want to get your significant other to go to a movie with you and they don't want to see that movie, you have to get creative, right? Yeah. And so where I think the decision and where the distinctions break down is where people get really, I think, their backs up is when they go, well, copywriters and art directors have trained for years to do that craft. And I go, absolutely. That doesn't mean that anybody can practice that craft. However, everybody's creative. And ideas can come from everywhere. And what your job is, and as a company of us, we're 23 people. I work 23 creative people. I mean, I've got project managers, I've got everybody, but we really do look at it as everybody can have an idea. And what does that mean? You now need to have a tougher skin about your idea. You need to take your ego out of it because your idea might suck. Right? But that doesn't mean you didn't have an idea. And so I have bad ideas all the time. We all have bad ideas all the time, but I think there's a distinction between saying someone's creative and someone's a advertising creative person, which usually means art director, writer, designer. It breaks down into these sort of craft distinctions. And I'm very comfortable in that world. It doesn't bother me. Like, I just think it's wonderful to say, like, hey, we do a lot of projects that we open up to the entire agency. And it's really weird what comes back sometimes, and I will say most of the time, it doesn't get solved by, but sometimes it does. Sometimes it does. And sometimes someone has a great idea and you're like, oh my God. And now you got to break down into your craft and go, writer's got to write that. And a designer has to design it and the craft stays intact, and we have a real respect for craft at my agency, let me tell you. And, but I love the idea of everybody's creative. And, I am part of a couple of other businesses and I'm blown away by the creativity of some of my non-advertising partners. Like they come up with really interesting things that I wouldn't have even thought of because I come at it from an advertising framework sometimes, So that's my feeling. That was a long-winded answer, but I do think that creativity is this weird alchemical thing that is best. It's wonderful. I think nothing leads you to be more creative than having boundaries, that you're trying to wait. There's a really great book. I keep mentioning books.
Yeah.
A great book by a guy named Ernie Schenk. I don't know if you know Ernie Schenk. He's should be a Hall of Fame copywriter. He's an amazing copywriter from New England. He's just fantastic. Maybe someday he will be. He was at Hill Holiday for years, and he had his own agency for a while. But Ernie wrote a book called, I believe it's called the Houdini Solution.
The Houdini Solution. Okay.
We'll get the accurate name, but his whole idea is that he uses a metaphor that's beautiful, which is even the mightiest rivers have banks, and you need constraints to be creative. And so he talks a lot about thinking your way out, thinking inside the box to get out versus people use the term think outside the box. So he's like, no, think inside the box and blow the doors out, like blow the sides out of the box, And I love that analogy. It's beautiful.
That's actually fantastic. I mean, I agree with you completely that everybody's creative. My loose definition is creativity is it's just a unique way of arriving at a solution that wasn't obvious.
Right.
And what you've said about separating it from idea generation to craft is really important, because then the craft can then finesse that idea into something magical that becomes a wonderful piece of work. What wonderful piece of work has moved you in recent time? Like, I'm really struggling to find advertising that moves me. And it could just be because I'm not searching wide enough, or I just haven't come across something fantastic. But what piece of advertising has moved you recently, and why?
I think the work that Procter and Gamble is doing right now around D&I and in particular the commercial The Talk. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yes,
It's probably about 2-3 years now, but they've continued to keep that conversation going, and I find that to be moving. It's very moving, and it's very emotional, but it brings you along with you. It's one of the most empathy creating pieces of creative I've ever seen. I mean, it creates empathy versus preaching at you. It's so beautiful. And if you have you seen it?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
It's incredible. And I probably have the wrong name, but they did The Look. They did a bunch of different.
Look. Yes.
Yeah, and it strikes you to your core, you know, and yet it creates empathy, which I found that to be very difficult to do.
And you use the word empathy versus compassion. Is that deliberate?
Yes, empathy to me is compassion is feeling emotional about someone. Empathy is actually putting yourself in their shoes.
Okay.
In my mind.
Got it.
And you know, we started a brewery. We incubated a brewery out of our agency about 6 years ago, called Ponysaurus Brewing. And our whole thing is how do we use this? We said, like, before there was beer in bottles, we said we don't want to just make beer. We want to build community. And at the heart, like, again, this is how Big P is, like, what do you do with beer? You get together with friends, and you get together with people, and you meet your friends' friends, and you talk, and you share stories. And we said, that's creating empathy. How do we use that? How do we use this product to create empathy and bring our community together? And it's just everything we do is around community and building empathy between people, even to the point where when you may not be aware of this, there was a bill passed in North Carolina about 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, called HB2. And it told trans people that they have to use the gender assigned at birth to go to the bathroom. Like, if you're a trans woman, you have to go to the men's room.
Wow.
If you're a trans male, you have to go to the ladies' room. Wow. And their whole point was, you know, we don't want men in the ladies' room, and because they're going to molest, you know. And it's like, oh, you know,
oh my gosh,
where do you start? But anyway, I was really, really angry about it. I was very, very angry about it, and take the moral imperative out of it. Like, I can't take the moral imperative out of it, but let's take it out of it for 1 second.
Yes.
It's a terrible business idea for North Carolina.
Of course.
It's going to cost North Carolina over $1 billion, that decision. The championship game for the NHL canceled their game, like the NBA canceled games, like everybody canceled games, concerts were canceled, like Pearl Jam was coming to Greensboro and canceled, and I had tickets and I didn't get to see it. And it was economically devastating, and from a tourism standpoint, it was national news that they did this, and they did this kind of under cover of secrecy and darkness. You know, like it didn't get debated. They just did it. They made it happen. So as a brewery, we were like, okay, we're trying to create empathy and build community. What's our stand here? And it's funny. I'll tell you, it's not one of my prouder moments, but I wrote this social media post like that day.
Yeah.
And it had, you know, we have this, it's Ponysaurus, which is half dinosaur, half horse. You know, that's our logo. And so I asked one of my designers, I'm like, you know, illustrate me a dinosaur, you know, flipping the bird. And I wrote, like, you know, to the troglodytes in our legislation, you know, I wrote this really mean thing. And I posted it, and I was like, no, I'll show them, you know what I mean? And I immediately felt weird. I saw it, and I went, that feels weird. And then my partner, Nick, immediately called and goes, what are you doing? And I was like, I know, I'm sorry. So we pulled it down. And at the time, we had a third partner who we're like, let's create a beer that raises money for the LGBTQ community here, and let's support them that way. And we did it we originally did it with another brewery that is no longer around. And we pulled in 42 breweries, I believe, from North Carolina that donated materials, time, distribution, ingredients, everything. And we created this brand called Don't Be Mean to People.
Oh my
and
gosh.
It's super cool. And so then all the profits went to these two LGBTQ things here in North Carolina. One was to a summer camp called Chords, which is a summer camp for queer kids who are not ever around other queer kids, and so it puts them like with people that aren't going to judge them, and they have these really great experiences. And then we were giving to some other things as well. But we've raised like $90,000 for these organizations, and then it turned into a fall festival at the brewery. We had a festival 3 years in a row where we had this music festival, and we raised money that way.
Yeah.
And of course, COVID stopped that. We did it in South Carolina last year because we had just gone into South Carolina for distribution. But this year, the fall, it's April, isn't it? So 5 months ago, we had to cancel it because of COVID. We didn't do it. But so we'll see if we get to do it this fall. I'm not sure. But what's really interesting about it is don't be mean to people. The whole idea of it is based on the golden rule. It's not very complicated.
Yes.
And as I've said, I can go talk, it's apolitical in a way. I can go into a very conservative Southern Baptist church and talk about that message. And they have to kind of listen. It's an empathy, like you can't disagree with the golden rule. Who can disagree with that? It's at the center of every religion and every secular philosophy,
Oh my
So that's what it's based on. But now, from a business standpoint, that product gets us into doors like you wouldn't believe. People are like, oh my God, what is that? I want that,
Yes.
And so it's helped our business as well. It's a really good example of purpose, living the purpose, creating really great advertising and really great, but it's not an ad.
Yes.
It wasn't an ad. It was a product,
Yes.
It's a product with all sorts of stuff around it. And so it's a good example of force. It's a good example of your stand, your values, and your purpose determining your behavior.
Yes.
Because an agency that believed that created a brewery that believed that, we couldn't not be in that conversation. We would have been cowards if we hadn't.
That is so true. Oh my God, this is such a wonderful case reference. This is so amazing. So what happened to HB2 in the final analysis?
It's been amended. It's been amended. There's lots of stuff. It's a very political climate, but it's been amended. It's a little bit better now.
Wow.
We have a much better governor now than we had then, in my opinion. But that's me.